To date, prosecutors say that they have reviewed tens of thousands of documents, done over 500 interviews. One of the interviews was Attorney General Eric Holder, who then recused himself from leading the leak investigation. With us now to discuss this case is attorney Susan Buckley. She represented journalists Judith Miller and Mathew Cooper in their cases against the U.S. government when they were subpoenaed to reveal confidential sources. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you.
I want to first ask you, what is most shocking? That the Department of Justice subpoenaed at all, didn't notify the Associated Press before they did, or the broad nature of it, or is there something else that's shocking to you?
No, I think the most shocking thing is that the Associated Press wasn't told in advance about this issue. The Department of Justice has regulations negotiated back in the 80s as to how they're supposed to deal with journalists. And they're supposed to be very sensitive to the First Amendment and the journalist's rights in representing an independent press. In a case with the New York Times and Judith Miller, when the government wanted their telephone records about 6 or 7 years ago, the Times was notified in advance. We went to court. We had a judge supervising the process. It was there was a due process. Here, it's just the shock of doing it sort of in the dead of night behind their backs that is really the most appalling part.
You know, with understanding the process and the protocol that you just described, but are there any exceptions, as the Attorney General has suggested, issues of national security with American people at imminent threat and harm? I mean, aren't there some exceptions for these types of circumstances?
Well, certainly there are national security implications all the time. Sure. When the government is trying to reveal sources who leaked classified information to journalists. This is not a rare occurrence. The exception here that Attorney General Holder, who actually has recused himself from this matter, as we learned yesterday, the exception here is you do not have to notify the journalists that you're going behind their back and getting their phone records from the phone companies if it would pose a threat to the investigation, the criminal investigation to itself, a serious threat to the criminal investigation. Now, it's hard to understand, and that's what the Department of Justice is relying on and saying it didn't have to tell the Associated Press in advance, but it's hard to understand what that may be. We all know that there has been an investigation into this particular leak. What is it that the Department of Justice is claiming to rely on not to tell the Associated Press in advance so that they could have had their shot at going to a judge and trying to narrow the subpoena or maybe getting it vacated or the like? What is it that they claim is such an imminent threat to the investigation? Now, I can't think of one, and I haven't heard anyone articulate one yet. We heard yesterday from Attorney General Holder sort of a trust us kind of response.
And also, isn't there an issue of it's not really clear the scope of the investigation. We know that they access records for outgoing calls, but we don't know if they access records for incoming calls. And some of the mystery behind it is troubling as well.
Well, it is. I mean, what does your phone bill tell you? That's what the Department of Justice is getting. They go to the phone company and they say, we want the bills for this phone line for this amount of time. And you know what phone bills show. They'll show the numbers coming in, maybe the time the call has taken. And depending on what your phone service is, maybe there's incoming, maybe there's not. We don't know the scope of it here, nor do we know how the phone lines are sort of allocated between the Associated Press reporters. I know in Judy Miller's case, when the judge was overseeing whether or not phone records had to be given, we could look at them and tell whose phone line was what, who was coming here, and try to limit the scope. Because there is no judge involved, because they sort of back-ended this, we don't know very much what's going on.
Susan, no question, I would say that when it comes to journalists, we all probably take issue with this. To what degree varies. But in terms of the public interest impact, what can be drawn from this for the people who do not work in the field of journalism? What is alarming, if you will, about this move that the public at large should be aware of?
Well, we have a tremendous history in the United States of a free press under the First Amendment. We have a tremendous history of journalists being separate and not intruded on by the government. There's a real big brother aspect to this story, which is very disturbing. I said to someone yesterday, if this is going to happen going forward, then every journalist is going to have to meet his confidential source. We're going to go back to the days of the parking garage in the dead of night and hope that you can find a parking garage which doesn't have a surveillance camera anymore. Because how else are you going to protect your confidential sources? I think the public understands that confidential sources serve a very important part in American journalism and in letting people know things that they might not otherwise learn about their government. And we can't just keep bringing up barriers to force confidential sources away. This is one way of the government saying, do not speak to the press. We are going after you. We'll find you. We'll get your phone records. Don't bother. And that's very chilling, and it's really against the great tradition of American independent journalism.
What course of action does the AP have at their discretion now? They found out about it. We found out about it after the fact, as opposed to before, as you already mentioned,
Sure.
to have the chance to go before a judge and have a hearing about it. But since it's already happened, what does that leave the AP with in terms of what they can do?
Well, what they have done so far is to demand that the Justice Department return the records or destroy them. The Justice Department hasn't exactly leapt on that suggestion. They wrote a letter in response saying we had a perfectly valid right to get them and have a nice day. It seems to me the Associated Press has two choices. One is to rally public opinion, which they seem to have that behind them, or certainly the journalistic community has all come out behind them. And the other alternative is to sue the United States government and try to get an injunction and get some relief from a federal court for this behavior.
There seems to be a bit of irony here, don't you think? I was just reading that the House of Representatives passed federal shield law back in October of 2007. Obama, when he was a senator, voted for that, which would have precluded the government from taking this action. So he, in a sense, has deep sixed something that he had supported himself. But also, it seems that since he was once a constitutional professor of constitutional law. So this aggressiveness seems a bit ironic, doesn't it?
Well, it does. A lot of us in the First Amendment community have been a little surprised at the aggressiveness with which this administration has gone after people who have leaked to the press, more than any other administration in American history. Although I must say that the president did say yesterday that he had no knowledge or role in the decision of the Department of Justice to go after these telephone records, that it was solely the province of the Department of Justice, and he had not weighed in on that.
If you are representing journalist companies across the nation, what are you telling them right now in light of this? What are you advising the reporters to do in their handling of confidential sources?
Don't use the phone. Find a parking garage.
Without the surveillance camera.
Without the surveillance camera, exactly right. Exactly right.
Yeah. Good luck with being.
Yeah, exactly.
to do that.
Exactly.
Do you see this as a trend?
Well, I see the search for leaks, certainly a trend of this particular administration. I think they've gone after 6 alleged leakers, more than any other administration or all prior administrations combined. Yes, and the aggressiveness with which this Department of Justice is going after those leakers is unprecedented.
Susan Buckley, thank you so much.
Thank
for your
you.
time. Appreciate it.